Good morning, and welcome to this opening session for day 2 of Restart. I'm Matt Mueller, the editor of Screen International. I'm delighted to be chairing this conversation with 3 of the UK's most acclaimed, industrious, and admired producers, all of whom have been at the forefront of independent film production in the UK for several years and even decades. In recent times, they've increasingly been gaining a foothold in scripted television as well. This trio's productions have been festooned with awards. Many have become huge global box office hits, and they are among some of the most well-known and beloved British films of all time. All 3 of our speakers have a phenomenal list of credits to their name, and therefore it's worth running through a few past, current, and future highlights for each of them before we launch into our conversation. Let's start with Tim Bevan. Tim Bevan is co-chairman of Working Title Films, which he has been running with his business partner, Eric Fellner, since 1992. Across that nearly 3 decades, Working Title has been a UK-based production powerhouse, feature films and television for the international marketplace. Its feature productions, which include Darkest Hour, The Theory of Everything, and Emma, have grossed over $7.5 billion worldwide and won enough Oscars, BAFTAs, and other prizes to line several cabinets, while its TV division's output includes The Luminaries, Tales of the City, and Hannah, the latter for Amazon. In collaboration with Heyday Films and Eon Productions, the company also opened the London Screen Academy in 2018 to help address skills shortages in the UK screen sectors. Upcoming projects on the Working Title slate include Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho, due to be released in cinemas this fall, and further down the line, Matthew Warchus's Matilda, Lena Dunham's Catherine Called Birdie, and Ol Parker's Ticket to Paradise, which will star George Clooney and Julia Roberts in a setup with the company's long-time studio, Universal. Welcome, Tim. Next, we have Iain Canning. Iain is Joint Managing Director of Seesaw Films, which he founded in 2008 with Australian producing partner Emil Sherman. With offices in both London and Sydney, Seesaw has produced a raft of award-winning feature films, including 2011 Academy Award winner The King's Speech, Lion, Widows and Shame by Philip McQueen, and most recently, Francis Lee's Ammonite. The company has also in recent years put an increasing focus on television, starting with Jane Campion's Top of the Lake and its follow-up series, China Girl. Seesaw's busy slate of upcoming production includes for television, Slow Horses and the Essex Serpent, both for Apple TV+, Heartstopper for Netflix, and Andrew Haig's The North Water for the BBC. While on the film side, Seesaw are in post on Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog and Operation Mincemeat, and recently announced that they are partnering with Film 4 on Florian Zeller's follow-up to Oscar winner The Father, which is titled The Son and is due to star Hugh Jackman and Laura Dern. Welcome, Iain. Next, we have Alison Owen. Alison has credits including Elizabeth, Saving Mr. Banks, and Suffragette, and is founder and partner in Monumental Pictures, which she and her producing partner, Deborah Hayward, launched in 2014. The company operates as both a feature film and television production house, and having partnered with ITV Studios in 2015 to form TVR Monumental Television, has been increasingly focused on the latter. Monumental's TV include 3 seasons of Harlots and the BBC's hit comedy series Ghosts, which has been a key focus for Alison during the pandemic, getting the 2nd and 3rd series across the line. But Monumental's film slate also continues to be busy, and following its most recent production, How to Build a Girl, the company is actively developing the Rebel Wilson musical Girl Group for Lionsgate, the Edith Wharton adaptation The Buccaneers for Focus Features, the JoJo adaptation The Giver of Stars for Universal, Longborn for Focus and Netflix, and an Amy Winehouse biopic for Studio Canal. Welcome, Alison. So thank you very much for joining us today. Let me start with a fairly big picture question, but probably quite useful given the context of 3 of your speakers. Given all the new platforms seeking film and content, the huge audience appetite for consuming screen content, and the fluidity that now exists between film and television, broadly speaking, in terms of your own careers, would you say that now is one of the best times ever to be an international fiction company of scale? Should we start with you, Iain, on that one?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, putting the pandemic to one side, I think that's probably true. I think that, and something we've been definitely thinking and evolving at Seesaw is just how you can basically work with storytellers in the format that is the best way of telling the story. So I think, and it actually happened for us in terms of a big shift when we did Top of the Lake with Jane Campion, and she was sort of talking about how that show was her novel, and she wanted to sort of do a novel on television. So I think I think the ability to be a company that is across all different sort of formats of storytelling makes it very exciting. So I would agree with that.
Alison, what about for you?
Yeah, well, I would agree, and I think that's what Ian's just said is one of the biggest advantages, is to be able to look at properties and be able to allow the writers and filmmakers to construct the best possible shape for them, so that they don't. You can buy a book, and whereas before, if you bought a book and it was an expense, it had a very wide range. You would have to encourage someone to do it as a movie, because that's where you'd get the money. Whereas now, it can take it, if it's a picaresque novel, it can be over 10 eps, and that shape can be encouraged because you can find the finance for it. So I do think I think it's a strange time, because the landscape is now so huge. It's almost impossible to have any kind of strategy, but in a way that's sort of good, because you're back to your first instincts and thinking, look, it's now so wide. I can't second guess anything. I can't second guess a market. Different platforms it's like whack-a-mole. They're coming up every day. So all you can do is think, well, this is respond to material and think, this moves me, this makes me laugh, this makes me cry. I'm a human being. Other people are human beings, and they're going to respond to it too. So and just put your faith in that, and that's both a little bit scary, but also encouraging.
Thank you. And Tim, what about for you? We'll come on to talk about the pandemic, but just in terms of a broader review, do you think this is a great time?
Yeah, again, pandemic aside, I think that's probably right. I think the big thing that's happened is that there's been, over the last 5 years, I think, is that there's been a migration of the key talent. So directors, actors, writers are happy to work in either medium, and that certainly wasn't the case 5 years ago. Is that there was a sort of snobbery about movies, but thanks to the streamers, and thanks to what's happened with, well, it was premium cable that really started it, is that television is no longer, I mean, it is absolutely equal, if not ahead of the cinema experience. And I think that many of the films that Working Title would have made as movies like 10, 20 years ago are probably better off in television, and it gives the filmmakers a longer period to develop character and story and all the rest of it. I think probably what we're all a little bit concerned about at the moment is where cinema actually goes, and what's going to happen there. Because certainly Eric and I both came into the business because we wanted to make movies, and whether that's going to be the case in 10 years' time, I don't know.
Well, we'll come on and to talk about that a little bit more later on, but I just wanted to, as you referenced, talk a little bit about the pandemic and maybe look at how each of your companies navigated the last year. What both in terms of keeping your companies stabilized, but also in terms of productions that you either had to cancel altogether, or we had to cancel temporarily, and then were able to later on once the sort of COVID protocols were in place. So I wonder if you could each just give us a little overview of that and how that last year was for you. I mean, Tim, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. Yeah. Is that thanks to my partner, we've had probably the busiest year that we've had for a long time. I mean, in the first lockdown, we had to stop production on 2 movies, on Lena Dunham's movie Birdie and on Swimmers, and we were in pre-production on Matilda. And actually, during the first lockdown, what happened, which is something that hasn't, we always, as a company, try to have a weekly production meeting and a weekly development meeting, which inevitably get cancelled because one of us isn't able to attend it. But actually, we were able to attend them on Zoom, and actually, our development slate got very cleaned up because of that. But then during that time, a film came together with MGM, which we shot last autumn, which was Joe Wright's Cyrano. And then this year we've been very busy. We shot 1 film for Studio Canal. We're in production on Matilda. We've shot Birdie, and we're shooting Swimmers, and we've got a couple of other films in pre-production. Is that basically our production department are probably busier than ever because of the COVID protocols and all the rest of it. And there are all these new experts on film sets, which seem to be very expensive, who are COVID experts. and the whole thing is a bit crazy, but it's and very expensive. So it's meant that the smaller films, it's very difficult to get them done. But I think it's settling down now, and that really the protocol. Obviously, everyone needs to be safe on a film set, and that what we're learning is that the protocols, the official protocols, the union protocols, which are what drove it, the SAG and DGA protocols, are probably a little over rigorous, and that one can navigate around them, and each film has its own issues. You know, Ticket to Paradise, we're just going to go to Australia, which I'm sure Ian's doing on a number of productions, and you can ignore the whole thing. But yeah, all in all, you know, production's back. Whether distribution in the cinema's back or not, we wait to see. And obviously, distribution on television has had a phenomenal year.
I think you mentioned, Tim, that two of the projects that you suspended for the pandemic, you ended up setting up elsewhere.
Setting up elsewhere, yeah, that's right. It's both Swimmers and Birdie is what they were going to be focus movies, and for various reasons that they elected not to continue with them, and we set them up. In fact, one with Netflix and one with Amazon. So yeah, a happy story there. I mean, the thing is that production's sort of nuts. I'm sure we're going to go on to talk about this in a minute, but what's happened has been this instant start, and normally everything gets staggered so that the production runs over properly around a year, but because everyone's starting at the same time, there's incredible skill shortages. It's incredibly busy. There's no studios, etc., etc., etc. But I'm sure we'll get on to discuss that in a minute.
Shall we come to you next in terms of how the last year was for you, and what you know, how you responded, and what you've been able to get back into production this year?
Sorry, to me, is that to Ian?
No, that was for Ian initially, and then we'll come to you, Alison, if that's okay.
I think when the sort of blind panic sort of ended slightly, and it was a really sort of crazy time. We had a last segment of Andrew Haig's Northwater shooting in northern Canada. When the first lockdown happened, we had Power the Dog shooting in New Zealand, and we had just finished shooting Operation Mincemeat in Spain. So we had to deal with a lot of furloughing dynamics on Operation Mincemeat. We had to shut down the Andrew Haig shoot in northern Canada and bring everybody back, and then also we shut down Power the Dog slightly later, because New Zealand went into lockdown slightly later than the UK. And then we were lucky, because of having that kind of two sides of the world production, that Power the Dog was able to start back up pretty quickly and finish the shoot. We were already in post on Operation Mincemeat, so it was just about organising that. And then Northwater, we had to wait until the world had slightly righted itself again to be able to finish that show. And then we were in, you know, very much supported by Apple. We were in a sort of long pre on Slow Horses and Essex Serpent, and they really supported that process and keeping all of the crew connected and on those projects, so that as soon as things were organised in terms of the protocols, we were able to be the first back up. So it was all of that side of that, and our production team with Nikki Earnshaw was sort of working around the clock to organise all of that. But also, I felt for writers during that period of time, because the one thing they want to be is left alone. And I think the whole producing community decided that writers were the only people they could call to justify their existence. So it was probably a bonanza time for writers, but also quite distressing, because we were suddenly all on the phone and very quick with our notes.
Thanks, Ian. And Alison, how about you? I know you were busy with your successful BBC series Ghosts. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, the focus that you put on that during the pandemic?
Yeah, we were just lucky, really, in terms of timing. It wasn't by design. We literally finished shooting series 2 of Ghosts on the Wednesday before and I remember the lockdown started on the Friday. We had to pull a tiny bit of shooting forward, but otherwise we just finished it, got it in the can, and then took all the you know, got the equipment into the editors' homes rather than being in the West End, so that they could continue editing at home, and we could just deliver each episode as it came, and then went straight into the writers' room for series 3, which we could do on Zoom, as everybody does now, and we had the American version of Ghosts, which we managed to, which started shooting just in the middle of the American lockdowns as well, which we were able to do exactly when it was supposed to be on time, so we didn't have to rearrange anything. And then we had a movie that got shunted because the COVID costs got too expensive, so I guess we were affected by that. And also, we're doing a series called Murder in Provence, which we were going to shoot a lot in France, and because of COVID, we've had to move most of it back to and do all the interiors and some of the exteriors here, which we're in pre-production for now, and just hoping, fingers crossed, we'll be able to scoot over and do some exteriors in September in France, hoping everything will be clearer by then. So yeah, we just sort of ploughed on really, and it's we were lucky with Ghost because it was on series 2. So by the time we came to shoot series 3 in January, with all the COVID protocols, everybody was very familiar with each other. So on a third series and something that's more contained, it's much easier than starting something new.
Yes, and I'm sure moving location for and also having to factor in COVID protocols has obviously been a huge factor for all of your productions. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. I mean, Tim, you touched on that, but I mean, one of the sessions yesterday threw up the rather sort of incredible number that apparently the COVID team on Martin Scorsese's new production is people, and that obviously it's a huge production. It's shooting in the States, and so probably there's more rigorous controls perhaps. But I wonder if you could each talk about how factoring that into the budgets and the whole kind of COVID protocols as they exist. I mean, how you're working with those, and how helpful they've been. What do you think? When do you think is time to sort of maybe dissipate them going forward? What are your thoughts on the existing protocols?
A rip-off?
Tim, do you want to start with that one?
They're horrendously expensive, and that you got to believe that somebody somewhere is making a lot of money out of this pandemic, particularly around movie sets. But you need to keep everybody safe, and that you don't want COVID to stop you. So I think on all of our productions, it's that they found their own feet, as it were, in terms of the way of dealing with it. Obviously something like Matilda, which in fact Eric's covering, you've got a lot of kids, you've got a lot, and there's a massive protocol on that because there are so many people. On Lena's film, we were lucky. We were on a location away from London that was isolated, and one could really control who came and went. I think one of the strange things that's happened is that there's a COVID supervisor on each set, and it seems to me that actually films and television in their sort of management are pretty well structured to deal with incidents like COVID, and actually the film structure itself, which is the production manager and all the rest of it, should really be the way that the whole thing's dealt with. So there's this odd sort of dual when for instance when somebody somewhere tests positive, there's this odd dual hierarchy about the whole thing. So it's complicated. It's just another issue that we have to sort out, basically. And I guess because making films and making television, is that I remember somebody saying that if they need something complicated done, they either go to somebody who's worked in the film industry or somebody who's worked in the army, because we're used to standing in the middle of a field with nobody around and nothing there, and a city emerging 6 weeks later with 300 or 400 people making a film. So it's just another issue, basically, that we have to deal with. But it is horrifically expensive at the moment, and that needs to be brought down.
Iain, would you like to add any thoughts to that?
Yeah, I mean, initially, and everyone, it was also making sure everyone felt safe and hopeful and coming back to work in those early days. But it did feel in the very early days like you were sort of walking through the sort of third act of ET with the tents and the it had that real kind of feeling to it. I think it's sort of slightly calmed down. It's incredibly expensive. You have to make a judgment call on film in particular about whether it's worth, because of the enhanced nature of the budget with all of the protocols, is it worth taking the risk on the film being substandard because you're never going to be able to get to make that film again? So we would not have been able to make the King's Speech during this period of time. The difference of the COVID costs on top of the budget would have taken the whole production value out of the production. So I think it's a very, very complicated moment for independent films that have some scale or ambition to them, especially if they're being made independently. So I think that's our biggest concern at the moment. I think television and all of the work with the streamers is incredibly strong, and we're playing our part in that with Heartstopper and the Apple shows. But independent film is it's a very particular film that I think can be made and be able to cope with the additional costs.
Yeah, that's a very fragile sector anyway, without the challenges of the additional cost, and that's obviously very difficult for the producers and trying to sort of get projects off the ground in that space. Alison, do you have any particular thoughts on the COVID sort of side of things? I mean, how were things on the third series of Ghosts when you shot?
Well, Ghost was pretty easy to maintain and contain because it was a show that we'd already done 2 series of. But as Tim said, there's it's trying to sort out the box ticking from the common sense that's irritating, because sometimes you're finding you're spending money on things that actually are not particularly, or there's some shyster has set them up as some COVID expert, and just to fill out the forms you've got to tick it rather than doing things that you actually know are needed to keep people safe. So, but that's all you just navigate your way through that. The financing of it has been the challenging part, because in general, I think it's added about 20% to the costs of feature films and about between 10 and 12 on TV. And of course, the challenge is figuring out who's going to pay for that, because the people that you're selling to in a marketplace, Taiwan is not going to pay any extra for a movie or a TV series because you've covered your COVID costs. They're going to pay exactly the same price as they always want to pay. And so to figure out how that's going to be covered and apportioned pro rata between your financiers was tricky at the beginning. I think there's a sort of accepted formula now that's made it easier. But it's frustrating. I find that the movies is frustrating because you sort of know it's not really 20%, and there's ways of getting that down. But a lot of the time with studios, you're not allowed to do that because it has to follow a certain formula that someone in California has decided is the formula you've got to follow. And that's frustrating. And I would agree with Iain that it's those kind of King's Speech-sized films that have suffered the most, because the bigger movies, big, huge action movies, superhero movies, people will just chuck money at because they need to get they need the product and they need to get it out. And the tiny little films, ingenious young producers will always find a way to do it. If they're $1 million or under or something, they can manage to do it. But it's those sort of $10 to $15 million movies that have where the economic dynamics just don't work in terms of absorbing those extra costs. So they've been the victims mostly of a break in production.
Yeah, and you mentioned the large scale films. I mean, Tim, you mentioned potentially taking a Ticket to Paradise to Australia. Is that a serious consideration, given that you'll have a bit more freedom down?
Yeah, given that it's set in Bali, we weren't going to shoot it in Shropshire. So Australia probably would have always been the place that we went to with that film, because I think the other thing that we haven't talked about is borders are the enemy of getting people across borders has just been a nightmare, basically. And so we're lucky here in the UK because we've got great crew. We're sort of self-contained, with the exception of bringing some talent in, but any border is a real issue with COVID. I mean, you can see that in the world generally, but it's accentuated on a movie, I think. I guess everyone's looking for where you can go and where you can do it for less money. Is the long and short of it. It's the same old thing with a new set of problems.
Yeah. Tim, is it right that you have a COVID-driven project that you created during the pandemic?
No.
Was that okay? I thought you had a. Okay, never mind.
I can't think of anything worse.
I want to talk a little bit about the just the competition to find projects in the current marketplace. I mean, given there are obviously all these new, very large streaming companies who are hungry for content, alongside the existing legacy studios and other companies. Is it harder to find the good books, the good kind of pieces of materials of IP that you want to turn into film or television projects? I mean, how do you sort of see a more heated kind of market for acquiring book rights or acquiring, or finding writers for projects? What's the situation there? Has that changed at all in sort of recent times? Iain, do you want to start with that one?
I think good books have always been competitive. I think probably it's a bit more so now because you get to pick the medium that you're going to adapt into. But I think that the exciting aspect of the streamers coming in is that actually the same set of writers getting commissioned over and over again, and production companies not being able to launch new voices has really shifted. I think it's shifted in a really good way, so that I think you can, with the right idea, sort of take a risk on a new writer and develop them, and then get into the sort of marketplace and get commissioned, probably in a way that you couldn't before, because everyone was deeply trying to get relationships with the 5 or 6 writers that were always going to get commissioned. So I think that shift, I think it has got competitive in terms of IP massively, but I think there is opportunities with taking risks on new writers and new storytellers, which I think sort of balances out those two things.
Yeah, I think the slight Americanization of the systems helped in that respect too, because you wouldn't have had a writer's room on a TV show in the UK 5 years plus ago, whereas that's happening a lot now, and it's great for bringing on new. Would agree with Iain. It's great for bringing on new talent. But also agree, it's always been competitive chasing down a book or a big piece of IP, and that's part of the game. And I think the agents are having a bit of a field day with it, because the streamers are driving the prices up, but you always have to be deft.
Alison, you mentioned writers' rooms on Ghosts. Is that a new experience for you, working in a writer's room or having a writer's room on a series that you produced?
Well, no, we did 3 series of Harlots, and that was that we had a very flourishing writers' room, but that was obviously in real life in our office. We devoted the basement to the writers' room, so that was about 3 or 4 years of writers' rooms on Harlots. So it was quite easy to transfer that system to Zoom. But I would. Yeah, I mean, the writers' rooms are great because also it's another way of dealing with the shortage of writers. As Iain was saying, that there used to be this kind of a hierarchy of just a few writers that were commissionable, but now that's much broader. But there's still an incredible shortage of writers, and sometimes you have to wait for. I optioned a book a year and a half ago that was a fantastic book, and I was really happy to get it, but it's taken me another year and a half to find the right writer and to wait for that availability. So you'll have to constantly ask yourself that question: Do you want it do you want it good, or do you want it quick? And the answer has always got to be good rather than quick, really, preferably both. But sometimes you get lucky, but often you find yourself waiting for the writer's availability because there's so few. But writers' rooms help that because because you can bring some younger writers up, you can, the more experienced writers will install themselves as showrunners, and then you're constantly training new blood to come through that can then take over on a second and third series, which is so helpful.
And coming out of the pandemic, I mean, are each of you focusing on different kinds of projects that you would have before? I mean, are you looking at different genres, or are the people, where you try to set projects up? I mean, are they asking for different kinds of projects? Is there a desire for lighter material at the moment coming out of the pandemic? Do you think, do you think darker material will still be popular, or do you sort of see a shift at all in the next sort of few years as we emerge from the pandemic? Tim, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think that, it's fairly obvious that people want a bit of escapism at the moment. So setting up lighter material is probably easy. I don't think there'll be any great big trend. I mean, it's really whether it's good or not. And I think that's the challenge. And it doesn't really matter whether it's dark, light, or whatever. It's got to be good. And that it's for us, it's always about trying to get that quality. And actually, I don't think the pandemic probably makes that much difference to that basic rule. So yeah, it's same as usual.
You've got a lot of musicals coming through though, haven't you? I mean, I know.
Yeah, Eric likes his musical. So there's a lot of musicals, and there's some romantic comedies and stuff. But on the slate, there's all sorts of material. I think one of the issues of there being no less low budget filmage going on is that actually where there's lots of opportunity for writers. There's a lot of opportunity for directors, but there's not a lot of opportunity for individual directorial voices, I would say, is that because a lot of directors are getting coming on and being evolved through working on TV shows and all the rest of it. And there's less room for the real individual British filmmaking voice there. And that's something that I hope hasn't gone forever, and that people do emerge, and they always do. But the Loaches and people like that, and the Frears, are we going to have filmmakers like that in the future who've really expressed themselves on films, individual films, from quite a young age? That's a little bit of a worry to me. Maybe they're all out there.
We have a question in the.
Maybe you guys are working. Maybe Iain and Alison are working with them.
Yes, are you Iain and Alison? Are you working with the next Ken Loach?
Well, I hope we're working with filmmakers that have a sort of career journey. I mean, I think that we definitely set up the business on building relationships with filmmakers in the sort of auteur space and then following their voice. And I still think that people want that, but I agree also that the television side is going to provide a different route in for people. So it'll be interesting over the next 5 years, with the Emerald Fennells and people coming through, is that move from television into film, and a whole new generation coming out through that. I think that'll be interesting. I think in terms of comedies or changing the slate, I think it's very tricky. I think if you're in production on something now that is uplifting, then you might be able to catch that kind of, hopefully, return to the cinema euphoria, and really capture that. And hopefully, I'm sure there's some producers who have got that type of film ready to go who are very excited about that moment. But I think trying to track that, given how long it takes to make a film and post and get it out into the world, I think if you were trying to capture the post-COVID trend in development, you might find that you're way past that by the time you're actually making that film.
Yeah, we've got a few good questions in the Q&A box. I'm gonna go to some of these. One is kind of related to what we're talking about now, and it asks, what can the industry do to help support and create a new generation of film writers? I mean, I would say film writers. Yeah, I mean that seems a good question, given what we're all saying about potentially where is film going from here? You know, what's going to happen with cinemas? I mean, what do any of you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've got quite a good support in the UK. We've got, you know, Film 4, BBC, and the BFI all provide good routes for film writers, and we've always had that infrastructure that's so much better than anything that's in the US. I've always been the envy of my producing counterparts in the US, and that you know, there's a way to develop younger writers and new talent, and that is often lacking over there. But I do think it's what Tim was just saying about, you know, the auteurs of the future, I think, is something that really does need an eye on, because the thing that's always existed for the UK, which is the good news is we share a language with America. The bad news is we share a language with America, is becoming exacerbated by the advent of streamers and the TV landscape, and that because we share a language with America, there's not a sort of natural protectionism that you might get if you were France or Germany or Scandi territories, where there's a sort of always a desire to protect the kind of local the local culture. So I think we really need to be circumspect about protecting those auteur directors like Ken Loach and Stephen Frears coming up, and not having their voices diluted because of the Americanization of the culture.
Yeah, Tim or Iain, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think you know, it's our duty as senior producers to protect entry level at all areas. I mean, which is why we started the school. Is I think to spread the load, to diversify in terms of the sorts of people who are working in the industry at all levels and the voices that we're hearing. I think it's in all of our interest to do that, and we're in a growth industry. Thanks to everything that we've been talking about. I mean, and just to pick up on what Alison was saying, I think it's quite important that we slightly divide the industry in the UK, because actually we've become the Hollywood of this side of the Atlantic, thanks to our tax credit and studios and crews and all the rest of it. But they're mainly non-British cultural productions that are filling those studios. Is that they're all sorts of big studio films, big TV shows and all the rest of it. And then amongst that, it's really important that we protect our island voices, as it were, and make sure that our culture is reflected there, and that we bring on writers and directors. But I think as producers, that's what we've all done in our careers, is we've evolved that. Is and I'm with Alison. I think there is opportunity for writing here, and I think television's really helped that like anything in film, you know, whoever posed that question, is you just have to go on bashing on the door, and then one day the door opens and you're in, basically. And there's a lot of opportunity right now. There is definitely a skills shortage in writing because there's so much in production.
Yeah. Can you also all talk a little bit about your the fact that you all have moved? Well, I mean, I suppose particularly Alison and Iain, you have moved more into scripted television in recent years. I mean, that's come on for both of you significantly. So I would, you know, I don't know if you see yourself, you know, you probably both would say you started out as film producers and now you're very much involved in scripted television content. Can you talk a little bit about the transition? Is that just reacting to the market? How was that? How did that change come for both of you? I mean, Alison, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've always worked in film and television, and I would say that, you know, I've always been a lover of story rather than film. I love film, but I'm not someone who is you know, always, you know, the smell of the celluloid, the darkened theatre, you know, the collective experience. I like that, but that's not what drove me into making films. I came into films because I love story and I love books and I love reading. And when I first came into it, film was the exciting place to be. But if television, if there was a televisual opportunity for something, you know, I did a series called Small Island that won international Emmys and stuff like 15 years ago. I did Temple Grandin for HBO. When things fitted the TV space, I was always quite willing to go there anyway. The thing that used to frustrate me about television was that in the UK there were only sort of 3 or 4 places to go. So if you're a tenacious person, like we all are, it's very irritating to develop something and once a couple of people have said no, you have to drop the project. So that's what put me off. Whereas with film, you can, if you're passionate about something and you want to make it, you just carry on and on and on and on and on and on until you find the right slot and the right economic math that'll work to do it. Whereas that was not the case with television. If BBC said no and ITV said no, you were kind of like, all right, got to give up then. And whereas now it's not. Now there's endless places to go for television, so it's great again. Like you can option a book, and you're like, okay, there's 15 places I can think of that I can take it to, before I've even started to get it. So for me, the transition was, I didn't even know if it was a transition, really. I think it was something I was always doing. It was more my work was more weighted on movies and a bit of television, and that balance has changed. But it's been a really welcome change, and it's not by, again, it's just reacting to the opportunities rather than by any kind of strategy.
Yeah. For Iain, I don't know if you agree with this. I think it's a bit more noted, the fact that you were film initially, and now you have very much moved heavily into television with Seesaw.
Yeah, I think in hindsight we would sort of look back and go, it was pretty crazy to not see ourselves as a film and television company from the very beginning. But to Alison's point, I think it's true that there was a sort of a cultural difference with the idea of, if you love something, you'll be able to push it and drive it till it happens. And I think it was such a small spectrum of taste, and it was a small spectrum of green lights out of the UK. And I think as the market has grown and there's been other players coming in, you are able to sort of apply what has historically been a film producer mentality to a project you love. It was always so frightening to me that you would maybe send it to 4 people and they would say no, and then that would be the end of that journey. That just seems so counter to how you get things made in the film world. So and I think also the spectrum of television, the way stories are being told, the way they're backing auteurs in television, it's completely shifted. And I felt very much around the time of making our first TV show, which was Top of the Lake, this sort of sense of film producers rushing towards television. And I bet for everybody who was in television, it would sort of drove them crazy. It just the culture changed, the storytellers became the same, and I think it just evolved. And it's a proper business, and so you can build your company through making television too. So it's whereas film, you're reinventing the wheel every single time, unless you're making sequels within the independent sector. You're making a new company every single time you're making a film. And in television, you don't have to do that. If you get a returning series, and you can explore those characters even further. So I think the whole setup of making television changed.
Tim, is there anything you want to add?
Plus, all of a sudden, you can make money out of it too. Helps.
Well, here's a question from the audience, which is looking more, I suppose, at the cinema side of things. But what would you prefer to have, and what would be most profitable for you? Netflix's most popular TV show, or a hit film at the box office?
Well, a hit film at the box office, undoubtedly, because the problem is you sell yourself out. So if a hit film at the box office has a tail, because that's the other thing that we don't really know yet. But streams, it seems to me, is that there's a inherently quite short life on any project, whereas a hit film at the box office, it ascends for quite a long time, it stays there for quite a long time, and then it stays around for years and years and years. So had one made Love Actually as a streaming movie and sold it to Netflix, you'd kill yourself every Christmas basically, as they re-showed it and gave you nothing. Whereas because it was made as a movie, that's not the case.
Ian,
That'd be me.
No, I think that's true.
With.
You've got to sort of make, depending on what your offers are, because there might be just one place of actually making it. But
yeah, that's usually the case.
Depending on what your offers are, and we have definitely. I think it's a mixed economy now, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think it sort of always has been between a studio film or an independent film, or in that sort of setup. So, but I love the independent distributors and that side of the business who have sort of loved cinema from the 60s, and different members of the family have taken over that love of cinema and all of that sort of stuff. That side of that, and seeing those independents making money from films, and therefore you making money from films, is really wonderful. And I really worry about them, surviving through all of this, and because they really do love films and love cinema, and it's a troubling time for them. So I think yes, it's great to have a box office here, and be able to know that box office is therefore somehow going to trickle down to you someday, at least part of it.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, for you still very actively involved in pre-sales market, in terms of setting up projects, and that's very much working with distribution partners around the world. But yeah, what do you think about the long-term future of that as a business model?
I hope they can hang in there. I really do, and I hope there's a real exciting moment in terms of people coming back to the cinema. But you also know that the cinema chains have had the toughest time, and they're going to have to fill the cinemas with blockbusters in order to make money. So I think there's going to be no room as well for some independent films for a little while. I mean, we're lucky that in a weird way cinemas have opened, and we've been able to release Ammonite in the cinemas in the UK this week. Having gone on a sort of roller coaster of a theatrical release plan with Lionsgate, but they sort of stuck in there, and then we went to premium rental, and now we're going back in, or starting in the cinemas later. So that we feel like there's a little window now for the Nomadlands and the Ammonites, and then the cinemas are going to have to make some money.
Yeah, the model's changed forever. I mean, and as somebody said at the beginning of the pandemic, is that this has accelerated the future, and as it has in every industry basically. And with the major studios pivoting to SVOD being their engine room rather than theatrical, who knows what the worldwide fallout of that is over the coming years. And within the pandemic too, the whole Windows thing has changed. So definitely we're returning to a very different landscape in terms of cinema going, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it all, how the consumer responds and comes, whether and what numbers they come back to the cinema in, but also how the new economic models work as well.
Do you think there is opportunity in multi-platform releases going forward? I mean, streaming and cinema coming together in a way that maybe works, to the benefit of both.
I think it's been a convergence because of the windows, the theatrical windows being, reducing from the studio's point of view. There's a convergence between the stream and the streamers allowing some sort of theatrical release. There's been an odd convergence going on, so it's going to be interesting to see. Ultimately it'll come down to economics. It's how you can squeeze the most money out of it, I think, is what it'll be, sadly.
Do you, for instance, with Rebecca, which you made for Netflix, I mean, do you, you mentioned obviously you don't, that's a sort of one-off deal with the company. I mean, do they share your viewing figures with you? And
yeah, but yes, they do. They do. Whether you believe them or not is, who knows? I don't know. Do you believe the numbers that the streamers give you, Iain?
Getting them, I think, is feels like a win. So that's the...
Yeah.
Is that kind of transparency not beneficial to everyone in the industry, though? Because it's really about, I mean, maybe they don't care, but I mean, don't you want to know what kind of projects audiences are responding to? That's obviously where, obviously box office and awards and all that kind of stuff, plays a huge part. But when you're sort of producing things for platforms where you don't really know what kind of reaction, or it's harder to gauge, I suppose, what kind of reaction there is to a project, is that frustrating?
Well, maybe with, I mean, I think the acquisition teams at the different streamers in film are pretty honest about what they're looking for and how that evolves over the years. I mean, without the sort of festivals and infrastructure in place for the last year, it's all been about getting those Zooms in and hearing all of that side. There's not the kind of natural social aspect of the dynamic of bumping into somebody in Toronto and them sort of talking about what they're looking for. But I think in terms of television, you get recommissioned. That's how you know it's you get another series. That's how you know it's truly been a hit. And if you get beyond series 3, you've really got something special. If you get past 2 into 3.
That's more unusual with the likes of Netflix, isn't it? To get several series, or seems to be the case. Would you say the scale of productions? This is an audience question. The scale of productions is changing in terms of both the size of a cast and in terms of the number of people you can have in a crowd scene. I mean, obviously that would be the case during COVID. Is this something that you think might last, or are there any impacts from COVID or the pandemic that you think will linger in terms of production? Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think so. The film set pretty much looks like a film set to me. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me for a sort of cutting edge industry how labor intensive we are, and how many people it takes on a film set, and all the rest of it. And one would have thought actually this was an opportunity to get rid of some of that, but it doesn't seem to have happened at all.
That never seems to happen, does it? I mean, whenever you take someone to visit a film set, the 2 questions people always ask is, what are all these people doing, and why does it take so long? And you never really feel equipped to be able to explain that, and you feel so embarrassed.
I have noticed, as a sort of separate thing, I have noticed in reviews of television recently, the sort of, you can clearly see this was made in the pandemic, and I sort of think, God, if you could understand what a challenge it was to, the people that were first out making the shows, it's like everyone should be applauding that effort. It was incredible. And yeah, seeing that in reviews, I'm like, God, you don't understand. To get 8 people into a scene at that point was a real achievement. So it's funny seeing that in the reviews and sort of knowing, what it took to get us back to work.
We have a question about finding new talent, sourcing new talent. One person is asking, no one accepts unsolicited work. What route would the panel suggest a new writer to take to get their work seen? Are there any options out there that you can share or suggest? Alison, any thoughts on that one?
I have thoughts, but they're not very original ones. I would say get an agent, because that's the way the industry works, is that we don't accept unsolicited scripts simply because there's not enough hours in the day to do that. So we rely on the next echelon, which is tried and trusted agents with whom we've got great relationships, who do read unsolicited scripts, and we'll sort the wheat from the chaff and find the really great up and coming people. And once, if an agent sends me a script saying this person's had nothing made, this is something they wrote in their bedroom, but I think it's great, will you have a read? Yeah, not only would I have a read, I'd be really excited to have a read, and would get to it really quickly. But you do need that. if I was to read all the unsolicited scripts that got sent, I would never be making any films or TV series, because that's all I would be doing. So my advice would be to just keep at it and keep sending your stuff to all the agents, until someone recognizes the talent and takes it on.
Is that the same advice you would give Iain and Tim? Yeah,
I would agree.
I think so, and most organisations have schemes for new writers as well now. So I think it's searching out those new writer schemes and opportunities and workshops. But yeah, it's very competitive for agents to find those writers now. So if there's a spark of talent that they can help evolve and then get to us, I think there's the appetite there.
Yeah. Another question from the viewers. Does the panel believe that the economic pressures created by COVID could force more consolidation in the independent film sector, mergers of companies to create greater scale? And would that be a good thing? Do you have any thoughts on that, Iain?
I think it's sort of happening, or I think in terms of films, the dynamics of the UK distribution scene have very much changed in the last sort of 18 months. So I'm not so. I think there will be consolidation, but I think that's inevitable. It's been such a sort of traumatic moment for the industry. There are going to be some changes. I just don't know what changes exactly are going to happen, because what I thought was happening in the industry last week is changing this week. So we're just going to have to ride it out a little bit. Yeah,
given that it's happening right at the top of the industry, starting with Fox, Disney, and now Discovery, Warner's, and Amazon, MGM. So one's got to believe that that's going to trickle down, and that there is some form of consolidation.
Are there benefits to that for the industry, or what do you have a view on these mega mergers that are taking place?
Wait and see, I guess.
It depends.
It's in a way it's a problem, because there are less buyers at that level. When those big companies start to consolidate, and also they start to want to buy from themselves. So I think as independents, it's probably, it's not that great. But there again is I've always believed that the reason Eric and I went into partnership originally is that we felt that we could cover more ground together, basically, and I think that that's proven to be true. And I think that we all work in partnerships, in actual fact, all three of us, and that's probably the same reason for everyone, is that one and one equals a bit more than two somehow. And so yeah, consolidation is a good thing.
We don't have too much time left, but I just wanted to talk a little bit, I guess, to close, just with the opportunities that exist in television now. You all have obviously TV projects and film projects on your slate. Is there a fluidity when you start developing a project in one, perhaps as a film, that you decide to make it a TV project because you think it'll work better that way, or vice versa? Are there any examples you can cite in that realm? Does that happen more regularly now than it used to, or Iain,
I think conversion is a bit of a buzzword. I think we've all got scripts that we started out with as movies that you convert to television. In fact, I've got one that I'm doing with the very lovely Tim Bevan down there. We've got some Jackie Collins books that we bought together originally to do as a trilogy of movies that we're now. We sort of saw the light and saw that we could explore them much better and more fully if we did it as a TV series. So that's in progress.
Yeah, actually, certainly. And actually, we just bought a book recently which we thought we were going to buy for TV, but actually in creative conversations it feels much more like a movie. So it's great. It makes the job more exciting, this fluidity.
We had I won't name the project, but we had a script come in and it was like 220 pages for a film, and we're like,
feels like a mini series.
Might work in a different way, yeah.
Well, we're nearly out of time, and so I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to my three esteemed speakers, Tim, Bevan, Alison Owen, and Iain Canning. It's been great to have your insights and experiences shared today with the audience. And thank you very much to the audience for your fantastic questions. I'm sorry I didn't get through all of them, but they were very good, and thought it was a great conversation. So very much appreciate your sharing these insights with us, and wish you all a great day. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye for now.
Thank you.